When life is dull, when life is predictable, we turn to the unknown. We turn to something awful. Reality is full of mystery and deceit, but what is beyond this realm is much more horrifying. Thornapple, devil's apple, devil's trumpet, angel's trumpet, moonflower, stinkweed, green dragon, the apple of Peru, Toloachi. All names given to one of, if not the most dangerous, plant known to date. Before we begin our journey down this rabbit hole, I want to inform you that this video is strictly for research, entertainment, and informative value. I do not recommend or will ever recommend the use of any drugs, and most especially to minors. If you decide to consume in any shape or form any of the drugs that I mention on this channel, all responsibilities are left to you. You have been warned. What a pretty song. Let's slow it down a bit. Maybe that was a little too much. Let's set the mood though. Better. Now, I've been a fan of the psychedelic world for the past 5 years, and there are numerous psychedelics we can chat about. I recently found out about this drug through some memes in the psychedelic community, and it led me to a subreddit called r/Datura. Now at this point I'm thinking, what the hell am I looking at? But little did I know that I was about to enter an insane realm called r/Datura. Now it's kind of hard to call it a community when a lot of your members are just dying of overdose. Before we begin, I'd like to explain what this substance is and what it looks like. Datura noxia is a plant from the Solanaceae family, also dubbed as nightshades. There are known to be 9 to 12 different strands of Datura, but the one that is most commonly known is Datura stramonium. Uses of this plant range from poisons, medicine, and ritualistic brews. Each strand has different characteristics deriving from their narcotic tropane alkaloids. Two good examples of tropane alkaloids are cocaine and hyoscine, also known as devil's breath, which is used to treat motion sickness. The methods of consumption vary from person to person. The seeds, leaves, flower petals, and stems of the plant can all be ingested, smoked, and even made into an ointment. Here's a picture of what the flower looks like, and here is what the fruit and seeds look like as well. Like I mentioned here before, the active ingredients are tropamine alkaloids.
Scopolamine, hyoscine, atropine.
Datura has a significant high level of risk. It could even end your life when taken in high doses. Now I put quotation marks on there because everywhere I read, everyone would recommend doses that varied very differently from one another. From what I read online through Reddit posts and r/Datura and Erowin.org, and through trip reports scattered all over the internet, it's very difficult to truly define how much Datura you should take to have a genuine and safe trip. What I've read through Reddit is that it is much safer to smoke the petals or leaves, even making a brew/tea out of them. But the seeds is where it gets really tricky and dangerous. On www.mhs-dbt.com, we can read that taking as little as 15 grams of Datura, which is between 15 and 25 seeds, can be a fatal dose. 4 to 5 grams of dried Datura stramonium leaves can contain a lethal dose of alkaloids, while flowers and seeds are considerably more potent. I remember somewhere I read that Datura seeds are around 0.1 grams, but I'm not too sure where I read that. I just have it written down here. And honestly, I feel like most people are just eyeballing these quantities because realistically speaking, each Datura plant, whether it's the seeds or the leaves, vary in potency. Every time you do Datura, it's just like playing a game of Russian roulette. And I want to talk about the effects. I have never taken Datura. I don't ever want to have an experience with it. So I sought out the best information with high details that isn't so wishy-washy with the typical biased trip report. Our information comes from
angelfire.com.
Caution. Disclaimer. This plant is highly toxic and can kill you. People frequently die from it. Mostly teenagers mistakenly thinking of this as a harmless legal high, which it isn't. The problem with using this plant is that alkaloid content varies greatly among species, even within the same plant depending on time of day and season. Plants of the same species can vary widely in alkaloid fractions and amounts, all is dependent on environmental conditions. The following is merely presented in order to further the understanding of some of the physical and mental effects of this plant.
Through personal experimentation, some of the tourist effects are becoming obvious. First, the tourist effects from the stage of physical intoxication onward generally last 24 hours, and at larger doses may last several days. Ingesting a low dose won't necessarily result in shorter lasting effects. Even at doses where hardly any effects was noticed, effects were surprisingly noticed the next day. This ties into Datura's relationship with sleep, which tends to kick in the effects. The classifications below places physical symptoms before intoxication. At lower doses, there may be mental changes without physical symptoms. The foremost physical symptom seems to be an increasingly dry mouth. You may wake up during the night with an uncomfortable dryness. This dryness affects not only the mouth but the nasal cavities and throat. Swallowing may result into painful sensations in the throat. The next most common symptom is increase in heart rate. At lower doses, this increase may only be noticed when the body is put into action. Your heart rate may be normal while you're sitting or walking, but as soon as action is taken, like running or playing hacky sack, the heart pounds harder, and in larger doses, faster. Also, larger doses may generate a fast heartbeat even at rest. Exercise caution even at low doses regarding physical activity. Dilated pupils don't occur at low doses, except if applied directly to the eyes. The most common mental effect is lightheadedness. There may be giddiness and other delirious effects, such as confusion. Thoughts seem to become faster, sometimes at breakneck speeds. Delirium generally produces anxiety and physical discomfort, on top of Datura's other possible painful physical effects. Contradictingly, a profound sense of relaxation is possible at lower doses. Drowsiness usually takes over a few hours into the experience, sometimes so potently that a state of pseudo-exhaustion happens. There may be lucid dreaming at this point or a state of semi-consciousness where sleep and waking interlace. Closed-eye visions may occur at low doses and last several days.
if we just see like a guy like this?
This category includes dilation of pupils, drying of oral and nasal cavities, flushing on the skin, and increased temperature and increased heart rate. It does not include alterations in bodily coordination, alterations in the ability to speak, or any seizable alterations of mental or emotional states. It could possibly, of course, prevent danger to someone with problems in those areas. Maybe a heart attack, dehydration, etc. Respiratory failure has also been reported.
Want to?
This includes uncoordination, dizziness, lightheadedness, evoked laughter, anxiety, slight difficulty communicating effectively, and a feeling of drunkenness. We are approaching changes to the mental or emotional state at this level. This does not include out-of-body experiences, hallucinations, or radical changes to the relationship of one to one's environment. At this level, one is not incapacitated by delirium.
This is cool. They legit have the graffiti on the boot, like, damn, this is...
This category may include everything from the above categories: physical symptoms and physical intoxication. This category is divided into 3 by a time length factor. If these effects occurred for only a few hours or less, they fit into short intoxication. If these effects lasted until the next waking day, or for less than 12 hours, they fit into intoxication. If these effects last longer than 12 hours, including up to several days, which is common with larger doses, they fit into prolonged intoxication. This category includes significant changes in perception of space and time, visual, auditory, or other types of hallucinations or visions, intensified dreams, or blurring of lines between dream and waking time. Significant changes in perception of waking, wobbling legs or leaning of the body towards the ground. Out-of-body experiences, entire shift into another physical dimension, encounters with people who aren't there. Reliving of past events, a shift in perceived relation of one to one's environment, such as melting into anything, becoming one with the whole, or feeling alienated from everything, or other experiences related to delirium.
I would crouch. Definitely not something we should be.
Overdose. This category may include any effects from the above categories: physical symptoms, physical intoxication, short intoxication, intoxication, prolonged intoxication. Reaching this category, one should get their motherfucking ass to a hospital, or in case of the impossibility of this, such as unconsciousness, coma, or respiratory as well as cardiac arrest, have your sitter call an ambulance or get you to a hospital. Someone in this category has a good chance or perceived good chance of dying. Effects in this category are a resting heart rate higher than 180 beats per minute, cardiac or respiratory failure, and seizure. Although some may debate this, upon fainting or unconsciousness, your sitter should get you to a hospital. There's no way of knowing whether you are just tripping or if you're experiencing a coma, so that's my advice for that. The plant is still legal anyway, so don't worry about that.
The bullets, the background right now.
I'm still in high school and I'm trapped. So, as I'm reading this, it says here that the tour can last you from 24 to 48 hours. But in some cases, you might even find yourself having a trip that can last you up to 2 weeks, even having after effects that might last you a lifetime, if not several months. Datura is very poisonous and is considered more of a delirium than a psychedelic. Delirium is defined as a reduced awareness and ability to interpret the environment. Now I'm going to read you some trip reports from those who entered the gates of hell and came back to tell the tale. Be warned though, what I'm about to share isn't for the faint of heart. So sit back, relax, and be immersed. I'll start with a little background. This is a detailed report of a trip that spans the course of 3 days. I'm not 100% sure on all the details of the trip, as I can't truly recall everything. Clues I found in my house after the trip helped though, and chronologically this story is quite accurate. A friend and I have been serious about drugs for years now. We'll call him Chris. Between the two of us, we've tried nearly every drug that could even be slightly considered recreational. Drugs many of you have likely never heard of. Then came the inevitability. Deliriums. The day finally came where there were just no drugs left to try. After reading extensively, we turned to deliriums. It was all that was left to try. We meticulously grew and picked Datura plants that we had grown and cultivated over an indeterminate stretch of time. The day came when the plant was ready to be ingested. We separated a significant portion of seeds, 600 apiece. Looking back, the dose was absolutely ridiculous, and we are very, very lucky to be alive. I should be a dead man right now. The mentality behind the dose was something along the lines of we're too experienced not to do this much, and our bodies are too used to drugs, etc. Essentially, we were too tough for Datura, and thus took a very stupid dose and very stupid risk. Jen, a friend of mine, she came over to sit with us. We ingested seeds each as quickly as possible and washed them down with a glass of milk. We then locked all the doors and windows to my house to prevent any drug-induced rampages, police run-ins, or worse. Chris and I plopped down in front of a new big screen and began watching a movie. About an hour into it, I started to feel the effects. The dry mouth came on, as in other trip reports. I had no idea it would be this strong. My legs felt like rubber and my body was completely out of whack. I looked over to Chris to tell him it was kicking in, and I found even the simple task disorienting. He confirmed the same experience thus far, and what was the stupidest move of the century, Jen decided she was bored and that she would take 150 seeds. Now she's had her experience with drugs before, but she was our sitter. As time passed, it seemed to stretch. Much like a DXM trip, I lost all reference of time. The only indicator was a digital clock, which would have been impossible to read if it weren't for the large readout. The movie had since finished and the television was airing some show about cops. I honestly couldn't tell you what it was I was watching, but all the lights and colors melted into the visual supernova that I couldn't stop staring at. Chris grunted strangely and I looked over to see him sliding off the couch. I became frightened because at the very moment, the room had vanished. We were stranded on a couch in a burning hallway. I grabbed Chris and pulled him back onto the couch so that he wouldn't get burned. He looked at me with his massive pupils and spoke an unrecognizable string of words. Time slowed as he spoke. His voice echoed in slow motion and his pupils expanded beyond his eyes, spiraling towards me. I was intrigued at what I was seeing when Jen grabbed my shoulder from the other couch. She was engulfed in flames and ran from the couch up into the bedroom. I laid on my bed trying to make sense of everything when I saw a man looking through my window. unable to make out his face. I was frightened. It was dark outside, and I was on the second floor. Impossible. But I believed it. Jen opened the door to my room. She shouted something and laid next to me. Her face twisted and turned as I stared, and I couldn't remember where we were. I must have blacked out, because 3 hours had passed, and I was still lying with Jen in my bed. Only we were now both naked. Did we have sex? Why was I naked? What happened? I had no explanation, but somehow I didn't seem to need one. We tried to have sex, which is weird in itself since we had never so much as kissed before this. I was too far gone to know what I was doing, and then I went black again. I came here, sprawled on my bedroom floor. I was now by myself. I'd noticed a residue on my body, leading me to believe that we had sex, but Jen was nowhere to be found. I walked into the kitchen looking for her, but there was no kitchen beyond my bedroom door. I stepped into a supermarket, only it was closed, and there was no food on the shelves. I ran back downstairs into the TV room where I had last seen Chris. The room was black. I saw nothing but a body hovering in mid-air. It was Chris, who seemed to be sleeping. I decided I needed a cigarette. Interestingly enough, I had one in my ear at the time. I smoked it and took another one from my now reloaded ear. Where were these coming from? I grew tired, but I still hadn't found Jen. I walked upstairs, and immediately upon opening the door, I needed to lie down. I thought I was in some kind of endless field, and that I was sleeping on the grass. There I slept for almost 20 hours. I awoke, still hallucinating. I didn't know where I was or how I got in there, but it seemed to be a house that wasn't my own. I proceeded into a living room to come across a naked woman. Jen. She sat in her chair, talking to nobody. When I entered the room, she saw me and immediately took off running. Where'd she go? Who was she? I needed to leave. I was in a strange house and I was stuck. I ventured into what I thought was a bedroom. It turned out to be a balcony. On the balcony, I found a man's clothing, but no man. Were these mine? I looked out into the backyard, and there on the ground was a man, naked. Somebody had fallen. Luckily, they landed in the water. I proceeded into the next room, intrigued as if I were investigating some deserted mansion. A radio hummed, though I saw no radio. I noticed a sliding glass door to the back and tried to open it. This was a strange door, and I couldn't seem to open it. I felt trapped. I knew it was some kind of illusion. I jumped through it, and I was right. There was nothing there, and I was finally outside, free from the prison. There was a truck on the side of the road that I noticed from where I was standing. I decided to hitch a ride and try to get back home. I jumped into the bed of the truck and I waited. Shortly thereafter, the driver got in and we were off. I laid still so not to attract attention, when all of a sudden, a friend of mine from high school appeared. I hadn't seen him in ages, but he was going to blow my cover. I remember I was naked and I didn't want him to see me. I tried to close my eyes, but he was still there. I shouted and tried to struggle with him, but he disappeared. The truck stopped. I was found out. The driver got out and saw me. He had no facial features, no mouth, no nose, no eyes. I jumped from the bed and began to run, naked and scared. This is my last memory. There is no further evidence as to what happened after this point, but I awoke hours later, finally, somewhat sober. I opened my eyes, and there were 3 people staring at me. I was naked, bleeding, and covered in my own feces. I huddled in the corner of whatever room I was in. It was a family. They found me and tried to keep me safe. I was in southern New Hampshire after starting in Maine. I was almost 3 hours from my home with no recollection of how I got there. The family offered me clothing and enough money to take the bus back home. I returned home to find my house in ruins. The sliding glass door I had imagined was my bedroom window. Chris was lying on the ground in my yard after falling from the 2nd floor. He had no clothing on. He was alive, but broke his right leg. I found Jen in my bathtub, still naked and sleeping. My life was hysteria for 48 hours. I'm not sure how all 3 of us survived that trip. I've been meaning to submit this experience for a while, as this is probably the craziest drug encounter I've ever had. I'm a bit of a drug veteran, even back then, particularly with psychedelics. It was the summer after graduation, and it was summer in a lot of ways. I had a lot of money and carefree attitude. One fateful day, my friend Drew and I met a friend by chance in a park, and he told us about how his cousin gave him some kind of strange plant and you can apparently trip out from it. I was up for pretty much anything, minus heroin and meth. I had vaguely heard of Jimson weed before, but wasn't very knowledgeable about it, other than reading Castaneda. We said sure and drove to Jay's house. First we smoked a joint and then we divided up the 2 pods between the 3 of us. The seeds were little, clear, and somewhat bitter. We decided we didn't want to waste any of the plants, so we brewed tea with the shells and drank it. Then we peeled off the inside skins of the pods and ate that. And finally, we smoked the outer shell. Then we smoked another joint. During the first 20 minutes, nothing too noticeable happened. Color seemed to be more vibrant and my throat was getting kind of dry. When I went to the bathroom to pee, very little actually came out. Jay decided we should go to a different nearby park as his parents would be coming home soon. As we were walking to the park, basically I felt the effects of being poisoned. I had jello legs and my eyes couldn't focus on anything specific for very long. When we got to the park, we walked over and basically slumped down at a picnic table. At this point, my throat was painfully dry. We had a jug of water, which I kept drinking voraciously. I also really had to pee. I walked in a secluded area behind some bushes and tried. Nothing. Frustrated, I jello walked back to the table and our friend G was randomly there. He was driving past and saw us. As he was talking to us, he could tell we were different and lackadaisical. "Oh, I know what you guys took," he said, and he started laughing. I could barely look at him. He told us to call him later and tell him how our experience was. Then some girl came and sat down at the table and started talking to us. There's a school nearby, so there's lots of people in and out of the park. I don't remember what she said to us. Jay said he had to go home, and we thanked him for the Datura. Drew suggested we leave too, and we got into the Montero and left. Then the unaltered insanity began. Just a quick note, do not drive whilst in Jimson weed, ever. We left around 4 p.m. We pulled up to Drew's house and around 9 to 9:30 with no memory of what happened in between. None at all. Anyway, as we pulled to Drew Street, we noticed that a lot of friends' cars lined up around this house. There appeared to be a party going on. We assumed it had something to do with Drew's brother. As we pulled in his driveway, the neighbor's cat ran right in front of us. We felt the bump and knew Drew had just run it over. He felt really bad about it. We walked inside and sure enough there's a party going on. We see about 20 or so of our friends drinking, laughing and being loud. And there were also strangers. Drew excused himself and went into the room as he felt bad about the cat still. I was talking to some friends and I noticed my friend Preston who was there was crying blood. It looked like eyeshadow and blood circles around his eyes. It was horrifically bizarre and he looked like he was in pain. "Are you okay?" I asked and he just stared at me with an almost evil gaze, blood dripping from his face to the floor. I saw grotesque people I didn't recognize who looked like Sloth from the Goonies, but not in a comical way at all. They looked deformed, bruised, beaten and burned as they shuffled around the house. Some were laughing maniacally and some were crying, others just staring. It was unsettling to say the least. Things were also painted on. It's like a dream, and the 3D world is irrelevant. There were burnt cigarettes and tacks sticking sharp side up on the ground and bizarre-looking plants pasted to the walls and doors. I then saw people with beet red skin crying blood. They looked like what you would expect demons to look like, just like every fairy tale or myth or religious text makes them out to be. Minus, perhaps, the wings. None of this seemed particularly odd to me at the time. I was confused who they were, but wasn't gripped with fear like I probably would have been if I was sober. Some of these entities were having passionate, crazy sex in the back room, but they didn't look as if they were actually enjoying themselves. I kept hearing the sound of doors slamming. Drew came down to see what I was up to, and our friend Preston started talking to the both of us. "You guys are late. We were waiting for you," he said. "We didn't know this was going on," said Drew. "Where's Kyle?" I asked. "Kyle is Drew's brother." "I haven't seen him yet," Preston replied. We talked just the three of us for a couple minutes, and then Drew excused himself to the bathroom. He couldn't pee the entire time either, and our throats were probably the driest they had ever been. It hurt so much to swallow. Then I met the spirit of the plant, Queen Toloachi, as she is known indigenously and shamanically. She was pale, not just albino pale, but literally skin tone like a moon, and imperious. She's also fond of tricks. I talked to her for a bit, though I will not share the conversations as I feel by doing so is disrespectful. I sat on the floor still noticing the tacks which shimmered in my peripheral. My friend Chloe walked in through the kitchen, looking frail, beaten, and toothless. She explained that a group of Mexicans had just beaten and gang raped her. I looked over at a towel in a clear cylinder on the table, only I didn't see the towel. I saw a talking head, and this head was Chloe's. She was crying hysterically, and Toloachi told me to give her a hug, which I did. I was literally hugging a beach towel in plastic. "Oh my god, Sam, what the fuck?" She gut-wrenchingly yelped and then started crying. At this point, I honestly didn't know what to do, but my bladder felt like I was going to explode, so I said I'd be back and went downstairs to the bathroom. Drew's mom was playing solitaire on the computer and said hello to me. I waved and went into the bathroom. Chloe was sitting on the corner of the ceiling laughing scarily. When I walked to the toilet, Chloe was standing in the way, Chloe, can you please move? I have to pee like a racehorse. She just stared for a second and laughed. Chloe, if you don't move, I'm going to pee on you. She just laughed again, louder. So that's what I tried to do. Again, almost nothing came out, but I did feel better. I went back upstairs. My dad was there randomly. He opened the front door and said, "Come on, kid, let's go." I wasn't expecting to see him there at all. "I'll meet you in the car." All right, I thought, and went outside. He was nowhere to be found. I did see my friend Tom, though, in an orange car parked right outside. He beckoned me to get in. I couldn't. The door was locked. He kept waving me inside. "I can't," I said. Then Tom started laughing, and this actually irritated me. "Forget it," I shouted at him. I was confused where my dad went, so I sat by myself on the curb. The house across the street was a wood stove-top chimney on the roof. The house across the street has a wood stove-top chimney on the roof, but I saw someone committing suicide by hanging themselves instead. It was like an animated GIF. When my eyes moved at all, I would reset. When they stayed focused, the man walked off the roof with a noose and hung there, waving in the breeze. I should have mentioned this earlier, but all straight lines shook, like an episode of Dr. Katz. Everything flickered actually, like I was witnessing the erosion of time. I had seen that kind of thing before while on strong acid. Just the lines, not anything else though. I look next to me. I'm still on the curb, and my friend Mike is by my side. "What's the problem, man?" he asked. "I don't honestly know, dude," I said. "I took this plant earlier and now I can't tell exactly what's going on." He looked at me quizzically. "That's fine and all, and that would be a good excuse if you weren't being such an asshole right now." I felt like I was an asshole ruining everyone's time, and I didn't know why. I glanced in Drew's Montero, and I saw possibly the scariest thing out of this whole experience. His head was shaped almost like a shark's, pointy at the top, and he had no lips and sharp, shark-like teeth. In fact, it looked exactly like the Hellraiser character Butterball, minus the sunglasses and paler. Just like in the movie, he said nothing. I had seen Hellraiser once before when I was 12, and I remember near nothing from it. It wasn't until I saw the movie again and I made the connection. In fact, I'm fairly confident that Clive Barker has taken Datura before after going through this experience, and the fact that he wore sunglasses in the movie and in reality, call it what you will, had no eyelids at all seems more than coincidence to me. This powerful entity was the only one I could not look at straight in the face. I tried avoiding his gaze the entire time. I looked at a tree in the front yard. I could see a ghostly essence in the tree itself. Actually, I could see the essence of all plant life. Chloe was right by the tree falling over. I rushed to go help her, but she was painted on a tall piece of dead grass, blowing flimsily in the wind. I needed to pee again. I went inside through the garage, and somehow Chloe had beaten me there, and was crying on a coat rack. "I don't want to live anymore," she cried, and it was apparent to me that she was hanging herself. "Chloe, no," I said sorrowfully and reached to bring her down. It wasn't Chloe. It was just a coat. I put the coat back and entered the kitchen. Kyle was there. "Yo, Samwise, how's it going?" I actually thought about that question and laughed. "I don't know. How are you, Drew?" I asked for a piece of paper, which I thought was Drew blowing from the fan. Kyle looked at me like I was the biggest dumbass in the world, and I don't blame him one bit. I went to the upstairs bathroom, and the light didn't work, and the darkness seemed to make the vision stronger. The toilet seat was swirling, and it was fairly hypnotizing. I also saw what looked like a ghost or a shadow creature on the floor next to the toilet, outlined by the translucent silver. He was completely two-dimensional and appeared to be asking for my help, though I couldn't actually hear anything he was saying. I finally peed, well, at least more than I had yet, and felt immensely better, though I felt sorry for the shadow creature. It was kind of a dusty bathroom, and there were glowing insects attracted to the dust. They looked like ants, mini spiders, and other insects which probably don't exist, and they looked bioluminescent. I put my finger on the ground and let one crawl onto my finger. I examined it more closely, and its movements were exactly like a bug's. It had feelers, and it was feeling me. I clamped my fingers together lightly, and the insect crumbled like dust. Its legs floated down in a spiral to the ground. I went back downstairs, and Toloachi, still on the couch, asked, "Did you see the life upstairs?" I nodded. I looked around. Demons and deformed burnt victims were still walking around nonchalantly. I went upstairs into Drew's room to see how he was doing. He was watching TV with Mike. Then we noticed the neighbor's yard via the window. It too was bizarre. There was a four-legged dog creature, very large and very black with glowing red eyes, sitting what looked like a throne on the side of the swimming pool. There were many people basically having a bloody orgy, and a massive amount of steam was rising from the water. There were also dead squirrels which littered the ground, and all throughout the branches of a large tree were squirrel tails hanging like evil Christmas ornaments. The dog, whom I've later found out is the second spirit associated with Datura, or second half, depending on perspective. He is known sometimes as the guardian or protector and protects Toloachi. He noticed us and beckoned us to come join them beyond the fence. Drew grabbed his binoculars and scoped out the scene. People were still having insatiable sex throughout the bunch of mist. However, with the binoculars, we saw everything in the grave detail. I could see the hair of the demonic dog and the squirrel tails and everything in clear high-def detail. Me and Drew saw the same thing. Drew left to get a closer look, the dog and associates still beckoning us in. Drew went to the fence line as I stayed upstairs watching with binoculars. Drew almost jumped the fence to join them, but I tapped on the window and shook my head. He came back up. We were tired and wanted to go to sleep. Drew has bunk beds and Mike called the top bunk. I said fine, but asked that he at least give me my sleeping bag. He said no. Just give him his sleeping bag, Mike, Drew said. No. I tried pulling it from him, but no avail. Annoyed, I gave up and went into the guest room trying to sleep as a spy versus spy creature watched over me, which was very unsettling. I didn't actually sleep and woke up around 7:30. I decided to read up on Datura. Only when I got to the computer to do so, I couldn't read text. My vision was okay, but when I tried reading text smaller than billboard size, it was out of focus. This lasted for 2 more days, and during this time I thought I was never going to be able to read again. Same with Drew. In fact, the trip lasted altogether for 3 days, and residues of it, like my eyes playing tricks on me, lasted almost 2 weeks. I'll cut the other 2 days out, as it's already been a fairly verbose story. I shall summarize some though. Everyone was worried about us. They thought we were never coming down, and to be fair, neither did we. We saw Dr. Seuss creatures in trees, elves, gnomes, dwarfs, pixies, demons, golems, all kinds of mythical, demonic, spiritual creatures. And everything Drew saw, I saw, and vice versa. We ran over a ghost with a car. Digital clocks would make Tamagotchi-like animations, pretty much looking like 8-bit animation. The auditory hallucinations did stop after the first night, the visuals mostly after the third night. On the third day, me and Drew and a group of friends went into a gazebo, a usual smoking spot. I saw gnomes having sex in trees. Little creatures would slowly bring antennas up out of the bushes, and whenever Drew and I would compare what we saw, our friends were like, "That's not fucking there, stop it." A train went by. We weren't that far from the tracks, and an obese naked woman was having sex with a tree just outside the garden. Every time she went down, the train blew its horns. The train was actually there. Our friends acknowledged that. It was uncanny. She would stay down for 3 seconds, and the train would blow for 3 seconds. This experience has made me think about it every time I hear a train. I ran into Jay a few days later, and he thought we had never left. He hung out with all of us throughout the night. Also amazingly, Drew's parents, who were actually there the entire time, had no idea we were on anything. I don't know how. We were talking to people who weren't there, basically in front of them. We were lucky in that respect. First of all, I'd like to say, do not take Jimson weed. 99.99% of everyone should never take this. It's all too common for someone to get arrested or end up in a psych ward, or even get shot from walking into someone else's house not knowing what's going on. It's also very easy to be poisoned to death. People have died from it before. Also, you will be tested by the spirits, and if you fail, there can be dire consequences, particularly with the protector, or also known as the wolf. It's not a pleasant high. In fact, there is no high. I felt completely normal despite the craziness I witnessed. It was kind of amazing, and I don't really remember taking much of anything. That's not common. I didn't really think twice about what I was seeing, just like I probably don't in a dream. This is clearly a negative plane of existence. I don't know if I believe in hell, but if there is one, this realm surely has some kind of correlation. Also, it has been said that Datura seeks you out. not the other way around. I deeply believe this to be true, and I believe that I was seeked out, and I think Jay and Drew were caught in the crosshairs. To say this was just all in our minds is hard to justify. We interacted with people who weren't there simultaneously, witnessed the same things, and I saw images with blaring details clearly through my binoculars. I omitted much of what happened, largely because of length, and largely because much of what I experienced is considered sacred, particularly some of the conversations. Not holy per se, but sacred. Also, I found that the first encounter with an entheogen or ally sets the tone for the rest of the relationship, and Toloachi still visits me periodically in my dreams. All in all, I'm glad I experienced this, as I've learned much, particularly about the nature of reality and realities. My experience with Datura Ceremonium was synchronistic with my expanding awareness. It marks a gateway from the world I was reared in, and the world I now walk in. Without an expensive history of my growth, from pre-puberty to the day I digested the sacred plant, simply recounting the experience itself would be fruitless. I would spare the reader great detail, but some history should be shared. It was autumn, and I was 20 when I consumed the seeds of a withered Jimson weed plant in the fields of a shell in the foothills of Appalachia. I had been wandering for months already after leaving an anthropology studies in college in search of something, well, real. My life to that point seemed to be a cycle of rearing, then disillusionment, and I had reached a weary state. After turning my back on my faith at 15, my belief in history's interpretations and philosophy at 17, my worldview and lifestyle at 19, and even my ability to conceive at 20. I felt naked and alone in a very cold world. I was living as a vagrant, and wandered away, only away, from all that was familiar. It all seemed ill. I had been fasting and having dreams with meaning that led me to asceticism. I had lived as a vegan for some time when I ate at all. I felt like I had been infected by an original sin, even if that was something so abstract that it couldn't be rationalized. I was ready to die, but I didn't even have the volition to push myself that far. The dream showed me glimpses of something that I felt closer to in the wilderness. When my childhood friend told me that he had spoken to animals while under the influence of Datura, I needed no more motivation. I could feel it was in order immediately. I wish I had the proper venue to explain more, as I feel that sharing would be correct. I consumed the seeds of a withered seed pod or two, which would amount to the heaping tablespoon, and about 4 hours later, the experience began. The onset involved losing touch with material reality. Things appeared, disappeared, and seemed in between constantly. I didn't have any concerns though. I was a totally detached observer. Then I lost touch with my body. My legs wobbled, my arms went farther and not as far as it seemed to wield them. I felt like I was swaying when I was not. No concern for me still. Then a great many visitors came and spoke to me. It seems as though people I have known throughout the past were coming back to remind me of lessons I've learned. Mythical characters, holy men, teachers, fictitious characters, even TV personalities, past masters, all reminded me of insights that I've gained from them. This lasted for hours, as my friend later told me. I recall at the end of this, they might just stand beside me silently, and I could see a light behind them and simply knew what they meant. Then an overpowering urge to urinate carried me to the toilet. I emptied a chalky white stream into a bowl and sighed heavily, and all of a sudden, my mind was clear. I didn't know what was happening. This is when I entered what I call a dream state. I opened the door to the restroom and the other side was vacant. I recall feeling as if a woman were embracing me, and I fell into her cloak. I caught a glimpse of her face and amulet just before falling. She was earthy and old. This is when things become too abstract to recount with mind. I recall feeling as if I was falling in whichever direction I struggled against. I exerted myself so much that then I decided to give up and just fall. It was after a period of intense fear and struggle at the prospect of falling that I realized I was floating. And the more I let go, the more I was cradled. There's a period after that I won't explain because I feel only I understand it. What I can explain next was feeling the moonlight like a shower of cool warmth. I set out and roamed the hills, abandoning my keys, wallet, and shoes along the way. They felt so heavy, I recall. I recall speaking using a vibrational voice to plants of all kinds. They would make me feel their place in life's web and taught me about mine. It was like visiting a place I'd never been and knowing everyone already. It was beyond description. I felt at peace. I recall resting under the moon and then noticing a tick on me, then 2, then 5. They crawled ferociously towards my head. At first I accepted it as I had accepted falling, but as I began to think about the situation, it brought dread to mind. By then, these ticks and other crawling bugs were crawling into my nose, ears, mouth, eyes, and every orifice. The more I decided to panic, the more I did, and I could feel my airways being choked. Then, as if the feminine character with the cloak was whispering to me, I let go again and I accepted death. At that very moment, every crawling thing that was choking me was transformed into a ladybug, and in a wisp of red in the moonlight flittered away. I was quiet again, then approaching from the distance a dance by a feline-like feminine figure. It was incredible, and I was deeply moved. Acrobatic yet smooth and flowing, I was entranced. Then I realized she was a shadow. I realized that shadows all around me had begun to dance, so I joined them. There was visual music and all around the shadows danced. They taught me to dance like them, and I felt so grateful that I cannot explain. There is another mysterious period here, a blur of abstract events. I then spoke to a dog for some time. Strange as it may sound, at first he was an old farmer leaning against a truck. He would nod as I told him things, mostly my deep feelings of goodness and seeing him well, which didn't seem strange at all. Then gradually, he responded more and more by turning his head and barking an old bloodhound type bark. This too seemed normal. Then his guise was also canine. He told me of his life and how he longed to feel wild again before he passed. He conveyed to me that I would do well to embrace the mystery within all things, even my own being. I understood then, but later when sobered, had to meditate long to reach this again. I bid him adieu and wandered further. There is another phase now, which is a mixture of seeing things in stages of decay. It is very difficult to convey, but amounts to the fact that all is perpetually thriving and decaying always. The next I recall, I was talking to a man in his house which I had wandered into. Later he told me that I woke him up by entering and he asked what the fuck I was doing there and to get out. My response was an expression of innocence recoiling from brutality. He said I examined everything in the room closely. At the time I recall seeing them as relics, and then settled on his sofa and talked to him. Being well experienced with psychedelic experiences himself, he relaxed and tried to get information about me. I recall him asking where I was from, and this is when normal process began to return. I could tell him what state and city I was from, but what he wanted to know was from where I wandered to his home. He asked me how I got there, and I told him my car. He asked what car, and I pointed to his. It really looked like a car I once owned at the time. Later, he heard me muttering to myself about things that seemed to remind him of a book he was reading concerning the Akashic records, which I am still not familiar with, not even its spelling. Eventually, I felt I could walk back to my starting point. I then recall seeing the cloaked woman once more upon returning to my friend's home, but on second glimpse, seeing it was a heap of trash bags. This experience lasted 3 days, an utter time warp. I later found out that neighbors had seen me wandering in horse pastures, seeming to play like a small child might. I was mud encrusted up to my knees and dirty all over, just wearing pants. I still have the same impact of these events with me today. I know how to let go. I know how to let life flow through me. My life was greatly enriched. I feel being disillusioned and ready to die was what kept me afloat during this experience. Would I have choked to death if I hadn't? The feminine aspects of all things has become the most fascinating and revered part of my life. The mystery has returned. I may never use Datura again. I don't hear the voice. As you can see, it is among the most risky trips I've ever encountered. After studying its traditional use, it is quite clear why that time was right. Yet, I will never suggest someone to use it the way I did. Datura is beyond psychedelic. I do want to add a disclaimer before we move forward. Datura may have horrifying stories, but carries a lot of lessons if you seek them, like most psychedelics. Maybe in the future, we can explore positive and profound trip reports on Datura. Though I'm trying to protect the integrity of Datura and its terrifying trips, I just want to say that I strongly advise staying away from it. Consuming this drug can either lead to long-lasting or even permanent effects. Datura can be fatal and lead you to cardiac arrest or even cause you to harm yourself. With this being said, I'd like to show you the following video.
Alright. It's March 5th, 2008. Don't seem to be coming down. It's been about 2 months. I can't really go out. Been spending a lot of time in the basement. I don't think it's wearing off. I don't really know what to do to make it wear off. Just don't feel like I'm getting that center feeling, center back. I think I boiled the roots right. I did what it said in the book. I don't feel like I'm ever gonna come down. And it's not cool. It's getting weird. It's definitely getting weird.
In the description, the uploader writes, "This video was uploaded to YouTube several years ago and I haven't been able to find it recently. As I recall, the uploader claimed it was found footage. He said he found the tape on a park bench or something, and was concerned about the person depicted therein. It appears he may have been having a rather bad time with some sort of psychoactive substance, possibly Datura or some similar long-lasting delirium. I apologize to the creator of the video if this is something he would rather not have publicized, and will remove it immediately if requested by the creator. If anyone has any information regarding the welfare of this person and would like to share any details, please do so. It is a rather fascinating and perplexing recording." Now let's explore some of the comments below, many of which are funny, but the truth is, we really don't know if this man has been going through an intense HPPD episode or could potentially be enduring a short yet potent Datura trip that is tampering with his perception of time. Whatever the truth may be, it is not a pleasant thought. Before we end our journey, I'd like to make one more stop where I don't see many people who share stories or information on Datura go. We're about to dive into a closer look into the spirit realm of Datura. What I'll be sharing is writings from the website called
firefly.gaia.com.
Welcome to Firefly Pages, a collection of writing related to Northern tradition, spirit work, and shamanism. This website focuses on sacred plants and their spirits, and is offered as a resource to those individuals who have been led to this work. We can find this written on the landing page, and if you are interested in knowing more or enjoy this sort of content, then I highly advise you check this website out. To make things easier, I will refer to the writer of firefly.gaia.com as Firefly and use female pronouns. This is what she had to offer in regards of the spiritual aspects of Datura. Species of Datura were known in Europe after contact with the New World in the 16th and 17th centuries, though there is a reference to a plant believed to be Datura stramonium in the Old English Herbarium, which is a Latin text circulated in England by the 9th century. In Europe, Datura was sometimes used in the brewing of beer, like henbane. In North America, Datura had a tradition of ceremonial use, particularly in the southwestern United States, Mexico, and Central America. The plant was said to have a feminine nature, though was given the masculine name of Toloachi, and considered a malicious counterpart to the peyote spirit, also feminine. Even so, several cultures made use of Datura's psychotropic nature and is considered sacred for good reason. The Datura spirit has a dual nature, almost to the point of being two separate beings. One is active protection and the other is more stationary and holds wisdom. Protective aspect, who I have seen in the form of a four-footed wolf-like beast, is the side most often encountered by those who've experimented with Datura go badly, which seems to be the case a good 80% of the time. Fast, vicious, and speechless, this spirit is ruthless in tearing apart the physical and mental health of trespassers. Permanent mental illness and death have been the results of some bad Datura trips. The other spirit, or the second half of the spirit, depending on your perspective, is Queen Toloachi. Tall, white, and imperious, she speaks little though. Hers is the only voice you will hear. During my early work with the Datura plant and spirit, I was struck with the unexpected qualities of passion and even fertility, in spite of it being such a virulent poison. It was no surprise when I discovered that Datura has a reputation as an aphrodisiac. This seeming contradiction is also embodied in love goddesses, whose favor is fickle and who have the equal ability to bestow joy and madness. Love can easily turn to obsession, the shadow side of that emotion. For this reason, I associate Datura with love goddesses, who've always remind us that love is a weapon and a poison as well as a blessing. Datura is the side of that blessing that carries a blade. Like love goddesses, Datura is very much a lady. She loves to be courted with music and song and appreciates genuine efforts made to win her continued attention. It is my firm opinion that Datura seeks you out, not the other way around. In the months before the first experience using Datura, I saw the plant growing in unexpected and random places. That night, my dreams would be visited by the spirit and images of the Datura plant. This happened several times before it was the right time to get to know the plant one-on-one. Datura guards herself and her powers with jealousy. Trespassers who enter her spiritual territory are shot on sight. You have to be invited into her realm and are in her control once you arrive. Reckless pride has no place in working with this plant and spirit. Experimenting with Datura leaves you at Queen Toloachi's mercy, which is little mercy at all since she lets her protector take care of most concerns, and what assistance medical science can provide. Reading this gives a very polar opposite perspective as to the themes that I have been presenting to you in this video thus far. I wanted to include Firefly's writings because even in the darkest of voids, there is a light somewhere out there. Though I personally enjoyed the rest of her writings on her substances and their respective spirits, I can only live vicariously through her ideas. Let's say I were to start seeing Datura plants growing near my home. I don't think I would take Toloachi's invite to her realm. The risks are too dangerous to just base my decisions on someone who may be seeing the world through a lack of scientific knowledge. At least, that is what I assume. That being said, we can now start touching base with the idea of risk versus reward. A lot of the time when you hear people talk about using any substance for recreational use, you eventually get to hear the conversation of risk and reward. You often hear of the trip reports of both men and women and anything in between where there were extreme lows and at the time felt like an impossibility to escape. But when it's all over, you're so glad to call yourself a survivor of that hell. In a way, you're happy and humble to have gone through a traumatic experience because what might have been tucked away deep in our subconscious becomes more apparent. Being under the influence of such psychedelics or deliriums can cause your traumas to be animated into the real world. What was supposed to be a night of fun ends up becoming a psychological thriller. You're scared, alone, and no one can help you break out of this nightmare. And the monster that's out to get you is you. I think that's why psychedelics have been praised over many generations. They bring change in major ways. They become the leap of faith that we might not potentially experience in our current lifetimes. And if that is the case, can someone really call that recreation? With this being said, and after carefully exploring the nature of Datura and its themes, I personally find it hard to endorse the use of Datura. But like many of the hundreds of psychedelics that exist, I think there's still not enough data to be able to make a valued and compelling decision whether or not there's a safe way to use this drug. Well, this marks the end of our journey. Thank you for joining me and taking you on this long, deep dive into Datura. If you want to help support this channel and see more content like this, please like the video. Tell us about your experience or thoughts. We'd love to hear them. Doing this brings blessings from the algorithm spirits and bring exposure to the channel. I wish you well, the viewer. Stay safe, be kind, and when things get dull, come home to us and experience something awful.
This is